I was 3 weeks into running my custom furniture restoration business from my detached workshop when Patricia Moreland showed up at my front door with a clipboard, a scowl, and enough righteous indignation to power a small city. "Mr. Harrison, we need to talk about your illegal commercial operation," she announced before I could even say hello. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair didn't move an inch in the September breeze sweeping through my neighborhood in Henderson, Nevada, just outside Las Vegas. She wore a cream-colored blazer despite the 80-degree heat, and her manicured nails tapped impatiently against her clipboard. I wiped sawdust off my hands with a rag and leaned against the doorframe. "I'm sorry, who are you?" Her eyes widened like I just asked her to explain basic arithmetic. "Patricia Moreland. I'm the president of the Sunset Ridge HOA. Surely you received our welcome packet when you moved in 6 months ago." "I might have," I admitted. Honestly, the packet had probably ended up in recycling along with the stack of junk mail and pizza coupons that arrived during those chaotic first weeks of unpacking. Between setting up my workshop and dealing with the divorce paperwork, HOA bylaws hadn't exactly been my top priority. "Well, Mr. Harrison, we've received multiple complaints about commercial vehicles coming and going from your property at all hours. Heavy machinery noise, clients picking up furniture. This is a residential community, and Section 4.7 of our covenants explicitly prohibits home-based businesses that generate traffic or create nuisances." I crossed my arms, feeling my jaw tighten. "Look, Miss Moreland, I restore antique furniture. It's not exactly a nightclub. And I'm pretty sure I have the right to work from my own property." She flipped through papers on her clipboard with theatrical precision. "The covenants you agreed to when you purchased this home state very clearly that no commercial enterprise may operate within the boundaries of Sunset Ridge. We have standards here, Mr. Harrison, property values to maintain. If everyone started running businesses out of their homes, we'd have complete chaos." "I restore furniture," I repeated slowly. "In my workshop, behind my house, the workshop that was already here when I bought the place." "Irrelevant. The use is what matters, not the structure." She pulled out a document and thrust it toward me. "This is your official notice of violation. You have 14 days to cease all commercial operations or face fines of $100 per day, escalating to liens against your property if necessary." I took the paper, scanning the dense legal language. My workshop sat on my 2-acre lot, positioned well behind my house in what used to be a large storage building converted by the previous owner. I'd spent thousands fixing it up, installing proper ventilation, organizing my tools. This was my livelihood, especially after Jennifer had gotten the house in Phoenix and most of our savings in the divorce settlement. "I'll look into this," I said carefully, "but I'm not shutting down my business based on one conversation." Patricia's smile was arctic. "That's your choice, Mr. Harrison. But I assure you, the Sunset Ridge HOA takes violations very seriously. We have an excellent track record of enforcement, and our legal team is quite experienced in these matters." She turned on her sensible heels and marched back to her white Lexus SUV parked in my driveway, leaving me standing there with a paper that threatened to upend my entire life. I closed the door and leaned against it, staring at the violation notice. 14 days. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew who might have insight into this mess. "Marcus, I need a favor," I said when my buddy answered. Marcus Chen had been my college roommate and now practiced real estate law in Las Vegas. If anyone could make sense of HOA regulations, it was him. "Let me guess," Marcus said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Patricia Moreland paid you a visit. How did you know?" "Because she's legendary in the HOA world around here. Henderson HOAs are notoriously aggressive, and Patricia has been president of Sunset Ridge for 7 years. She runs it like a military operation. What did you do to get on her radar?" I explained the situation while walking back to my workshop. A converted 40 by 60-foot building with rolling doors, skylights, and enough space for my workbenches, finishing station, and storage. 3 pieces were in various stages of restoration. A Victorian-era sideboard, an Art Deco dresser, and a Mission-style dining table that would sell for $12,000 once I finished it. "Here's the thing," Marcus said after I finished. "HOAs can be pretty restrictive about home businesses, but there are limits to their authority. Send me a copy of your property deed and any HOA documents you have. Also, the exact address of your workshop. It's all on my property, same lot as my house. Just send me the specifics." "I want to check something." I spent the next hour scanning documents and emailing them to Marcus, then tried to focus on the sideboard's damaged veneer. But my hands weren't steady enough for the delicate work. Instead, I organized tools and swept sawdust, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Starting over somewhere else would cost money I didn't have. Finding a commercial space would triple my overhead, and breaking the lease on equipment would trigger penalty fees. My phone rang around 7 that evening. "Marcus." "Okay, I've got good news and complicated news," he said. "The good news is I think you might have a way out of this. The complicated news is you're going to need to do some homework. I'm listening. Your property is weird, Jack." Like, really weird from a legal standpoint. When Sunset Ridge was developed in 2008, they built it in phases. Your lot was originally part of Phase 3, but there were some boundary disputes with the county over easements and utility rights-of-way. Long story short, a chunk of your property, specifically the back portion where your workshop sits, was excluded from the final HOA plat map. I sat down on my workbench stool. What does that mean in English? It means your workshop might not actually be within HOA jurisdiction. The covenants only apply to property within the legal boundaries of Sunset Ridge. If your workshop is outside those boundaries, Patricia Moreland can't tell you what to do with it. My heart started pounding. "How do I prove that?" "You need a survey. A proper boundary survey that shows exactly where the HOA boundaries are versus where your property lines are. It'll cost you probably $1,500 to $2,000, but if I'm right, it'll be worth every penny. I can recommend a surveyor if you need one. Send me the information. I'll call them first thing tomorrow." After hanging up, I walked out to my workshop in the gathering dusk. The property sloped gently downward from my house, with the workshop sitting at the lowest point, surrounded by desert scrub and a few struggling cottonwood trees. A wash ran along the eastern edge of my lot, dry now but capable of running with flash floodwater during the monsoon season. If Marcus was right, this ordinary-looking piece of Nevada desert might be my salvation. The next morning, I called Precision Land Surveying and explained what I needed. The owner, a gruff-voiced man named Dale Hutchinson, said he could have a team out within 3 days and results within a week after that. "That's cutting it close to my 14-day deadline," I said. "I can put a rush on it for an extra $500, Dale offered. "Have results in 5 days total." I swallowed hard at the cost but agreed. This was a gamble I had to take. While I waited for the survey, I tried to keep my head down and work, but Patricia wasn't done with me. On day 3, I found a new notice stuck to my workshop door. This one documented continued commercial activity, with dated photographs of my Ford F-250 truck, loaded with a refinished cabinet, a delivery van belonging to fabric supplier Southwest Upholstery, and a client's Mercedes sedan parked near my workshop while they picked up a restored chair. "They're watching me," I muttered, crumpling the notice. The photos were time-stamped and taken from somewhere across the street, probably from Patricia's own house. I'd noticed her property had a perfect sight line to my driveway. That afternoon, my neighbor from 3 houses down stopped by. Tom Brennan was a retired postal worker in his 60s who'd lived in Sunset Ridge since it was built. He found me sanding the Mission-style table, working out my frustration with aggressive strokes. "Heard Patricia's giving you grief," Tom said, settling onto a stool I kept for clients. She's done this before, you know. Went after the Richardsons 2 years ago because Linda Richardson was selling her pottery on Etsy and had the occasional customer pick up orders. Forced them to shut down completely. Did they fight it? Tom shook his head. They couldn't afford a lawyer. Paid the fines for 2 months, then stopped the business. Linda was heartbroken. That pottery was her whole retirement plan. I set down my sanding block. I'm not rolling over, Tom. I've got a surveyor coming to check the property boundaries. His eyebrows rose. Smart. I remember when they built this place. Your lot was always a little odd, something about utility easements. Never thought much about it, but maybe you're onto something. I hope so. Because if not, I'm looking at $100 a day fines starting in 11 days. Tom stood, patting my shoulder. Patricia likes to act like she's untouchable, but she's not. Plenty of people in this neighborhood are tired of her power trips. You stand up to her, you might find you have more support than you think. After Tom left, I felt slightly better. But that evening, my resolve was tested again when I found a new email from Patricia. The subject line read, "Final warning, Sunset Ridge HOA violation." The email was 3 paragraphs of legal-sounding threats, CC'd to the entire HOA board and someone named Gerald Stevens, attorney at law. Patricia wrote that my flagrant disregard for community standards left them no choice but to pursue maximum enforcement measures. The fines would begin as scheduled, and they were prepared to file a lien against my property if necessary. I forwarded the email to Marcus, who called me 20 minutes later. "She's trying to intimidate you," he said. "Gerald Stevens is their HOA attorney. I've dealt with him before. He's competent but not creative. If you can prove your workshop is outside their jurisdiction, there's nothing he can do." "And if I can't prove it," Marcus paused, "then you're probably going to end up in court and it's going to get expensive. But Jack, I looked at those preliminary documents again. I really think you have a case here. Just hang tight until the survey comes back." Hanging tight was easier said than done. I threw myself into work, finishing the Art Deco dresser and starting on a complex repair to the Victorian sideboard's carved gallery rail. Clients called with new projects and I had to stall them, uncertain about my future. One client, a designer from Summerlin named Angela Cortez, who regularly sent me restoration work, sensed something was wrong. "Jack, are you okay? You sound stressed." I explained the HOA situation. Angela, who ran her own interior design firm, immediately got angry on my behalf. "That's ridiculous. Your work is impeccable and you're not bothering anyone. How is restoring furniture any different from someone working remotely for a tech company? It's all home-based work." Apparently, the traffic and commercial activity make it different. That's garbage. "Look, I have a lawyer I use for business stuff. Want me to send you his information? I've got someone on it, but thanks, I appreciate it. Just let me know if you need a statement about your work or character references or anything." Patricia sounds like the kind of person who gives HOAs a bad name. The survey team arrived on day 5, exactly as Dale had promised. 2 technicians spent 6 hours setting up equipment, taking measurements, and consulting what looked like historical maps and documents. I watched from my workshop, too nervous to interrupt but desperate to know what they were finding. Dale himself showed up near the end of the day, a weathered man in his 50s wearing a sun-faded baseball cap and carrying a tablet. He walked the perimeter of my workshop, occasionally checking his tablet and nodding to himself. "Mr. Harrison," he called out, "can you come here a minute?" I jogged over, my heart hammering. Dale pointed to a corner of my workshop, then swept his arm in an arc. "See where your building sits? Now look at this." He showed me his tablet, which displayed an overlay of property lines, HOA boundaries, and survey markers. "The original HOA plat stops right about here." He pointed to a spot roughly 15 feet in front of my workshop. Everything past this point was excluded from the Sunset Ridge covenants due to a utility easement dispute and some county zoning issues that came up during Phase 3 development. "So my workshop? Your workshop is completely outside HOA jurisdiction, It's still your property and it's still residentially zoned by the county, but the HOA covenants don't apply to it. They can't regulate what you do in that building because legally, it's not part of their community. I felt like someone had just lifted a truck off my chest. You're absolutely sure? I'll have the full report with all the documentation in 2 days, but yeah, I'm sure. We found the original survey markers from 2008, cross-referenced them with the county records and the HOA plat map. It's clear as day. You got lucky, Mr. Harrison. Most people in HOA disputes aren't this lucky. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying Dale's words, afraid I'd misunderstood or gotten my hopes up too high. But when the official survey report arrived 2 days later, a 40-page document with maps, photos, and legal descriptions, it confirmed everything. My workshop sat entirely outside the Sunset Ridge HOA boundaries. I immediately sent a copy to Marcus, who called me 30 minutes later, laughing. "Jack, this is perfect, like absolutely perfect. Patricia is going to lose her mind. What do I do now?" You write a very polite letter explaining that you've obtained a professional survey demonstrating your workshop is outside HOA jurisdiction, and therefore their violation notices are invalid. Attach a copy of the survey. Send it to Patricia and the HOA board. CC their attorney, Gerald Stevens. And then you keep doing exactly what you've been doing. That's it. That's it. If they push back, they'll be legally in the wrong and they'll know it. HOAs have authority only within their legal boundaries. They can't enforce covenants on property that's not part of their plat map. It's that simple. I spent the next 2 hours drafting the letter, trying to strike the right tone between professional and firmly assertive. Marcus reviewed it and suggested a few tweaks. The final version read, "Dear Miss Moreland and Sunset Ridge HOA board members, I am writing in response to the violation notices dated September 15th and September 18th regarding my furniture restoration business, operated from a workshop on my property at 7845 Desert Canyon Drive. I have obtained a professional boundary survey from Precision Land Surveying, which conclusively demonstrates that my workshop is located entirely outside the legal boundaries of the Sunset Ridge HOA as defined in the original plat map, filed with Clark County in 2008. The relevant survey documentation is attached. As my workshop is not within HOA jurisdiction, the covenants and restrictions governing Sunset Ridge do not apply to activities conducted in that structure. Therefore, the violation notices are invalid, and I will not be ceasing my business operations or paying any fines. I trust this matter is now resolved. Should you have questions about the survey findings, I encourage you to consult with your legal counsel and review the original HOA plat documents on file with the county. Sincerely, Jack Harrison. I sent the email on a Tuesday morning, 1 day before the fines were supposed to start. Then I waited. Patricia's response came in less than an hour, and it was not gracious. "Mr. Harrison, your property is clearly part of Sunset Ridge. You use our roads, benefit from our maintained common areas, and pay HOA dues. You cannot simply claim a portion of your property is exempt from rules that govern the entire community. This is a transparent attempt to evade legitimate covenant enforcement. We reject your survey findings and expect full compliance with the original violation notice. Fines will begin accruing as scheduled. Patricia Moreland, President, Sunset Ridge HOA." I read the email twice, feeling my blood pressure rise. She wasn't even going to look at the survey evidence. I forwarded it to Marcus. His response was brief. "Let her dig her own hole, don't respond. Document everything." The next day, I received a certified letter from Gerald Stevens, the HOA attorney. It was more measured than Patricia's email, but equally dismissive. Mr. Stevens wrote that apparent boundary discrepancies didn't negate my obligations under the HOA covenants, and that the HOA board had voted unanimously to begin fine enforcement. "They're really doing this," I said to Marcus on the phone. They're charging me $100 a day even after seeing the survey. Let them. Every day they continue, they're building your case if this goes to court. And Jack, it's probably going to court. Patricia doesn't sound like someone who backs down easily. He was right. Over the next week, I received daily emails documenting my continued violations and tallying my fines. After 7 days, I supposedly owed $700. The emails came like clockwork at 9 a.m. each morning, always from Patricia, always CC'd to the board and their attorney. I kept working, fulfilling client orders and taking on new projects. Angela Cortez sent me 3 more pieces, including a valuable 1920s sideboard that needed extensive veneer repair. The work was good, steady, and profitable, but the harassment from the HOA was wearing on me. Things escalated on day 12 of the fine period. I came home from picking up supplies to find a lien notice posted on my front door. The HOA was claiming I owed $1,200 in fines plus $300 in administrative fees, and they were threatening to place a lien on my property if I didn't pay within 30 days. That was when I decided to fight back publicly. I scanned the lien notice and posted it on the Sunset Ridge Community Facebook page along with a detailed explanation of the situation, including excerpts from the survey showing my workshop was outside HOA boundaries. Residents of Sunset Ridge, I wrote, I want you to see how your HOA board operates. Despite professional survey evidence proving my workshop is outside their jurisdiction, they continue to harass me and threaten my livelihood. Is this the kind of leadership we want in our community? The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, dozens of neighbors commented, many sharing their own stories of HOA overreach. Tom Brennan posted about the Richardsons and Linda's pottery business. A woman named Sharon Valdez wrote about being fined $2,000 because her mailbox paint was the wrong shade of beige. Another resident, Michael Torres, described being threatened with fines because his teenage son's car was parked in their driveway for more than 48 hours during the boys' college break. Patricia responded on the Facebook page within an hour, her comment dripping with condescension. This is not the appropriate forum for addressing HOA matters. Mr. Harrison should direct his concerns through proper channels rather than trying to stir up trouble in our community. But the trouble was already stirred. The Facebook thread grew to over 200 comments by that evening, with the majority criticizing the HOA board's approach. Several people called for Patricia's resignation. Others suggested organizing a special meeting to review the board's enforcement practices. My phone rang at 8 p.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mr. Harrison, this is Gerald Stevens. I'm the attorney for the Sunset Ridge HOA. I put the phone on speaker and grabbed a notepad. I know who you are, Mr. Stevens. I'm calling to see if we can resolve this matter without further conflict. I've reviewed the survey you provided, and while there are some interesting boundary questions, I think there's room for negotiation here. Negotiation about what? The survey clearly shows my workshop is outside HOA jurisdiction. There's nothing to negotiate. Stevens cleared his throat. Property law can be complex, Mr. Harrison. There's the technical boundary question, but there's also the issue of whether a property owner can selectively claim they're exempt from covenants while still benefiting from HOA services and amenities. I pay my HOA dues. I follow the rules for my house and yard. But my workshop is physically outside the HOA boundaries, which means the covenants don't apply to it. That's not complex. That's straightforward. Perhaps we could agree to certain limitations on your business activities, restricted hours, limited vehicle traffic, that sort of thing. In exchange, the HOA would withdraw the fines and lien. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. No, I'm not doing anything wrong, and I'm not agreeing to restrictions on property you have no authority over. If the HOA wants to pursue this, we can go to court. There was a long pause. Mr. Harrison, litigation is expensive for everyone involved. Are you sure you want to go down that road? Mr. Stevens, I didn't start this fight. Patricia Moreland showed up at my door threatening my livelihood. I responded with facts and evidence. If she wants to keep pushing, that's her choice, but I'm not backing down. After I hung up, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. I was committed now. This was going to court unless the HOA backed down, and based on Patricia's personality, I doubted she would. Marcus called the next morning. I saw the Facebook thread. Jack, that was smart. You're building public support and you're documenting their overreach, but you need to be ready for them to escalate. How much worse can it get? They could fast-track the lien, force you into mediation, or file for an injunction to shut down your business while the case is pending. With Patricia's personality, I wouldn't put any of it past her. So what do? We go on a fence. File a declaratory judgment action asking the court to confirm that your workshop is outside HOA jurisdiction. We also ask for a ruling that the fines and lien are invalid. And Jack, I think we should add a claim for harassment and request attorney fees. Can we win, based on that survey? Yeah, I think we can. But you need to be prepared for this to take months and cost you several $1,000s in legal fees, even if we win and recover costs at the end. I looked around my workshop at the projects in progress, thought about the clients depending on me, and made my decision. Let's do it. File the paperwork. Marcus filed the declaratory judgment action 3 days later in Clark County District Court. The complaint was 20 pages long, meticulously detailed, and included the full survey report as an exhibit. We asked the court to declare that my workshop was outside HOA jurisdiction, invalidate all fines and the lien, and award attorney fees for the HOA's bad faith enforcement attempts. Patricia's reaction was predictable. I received an email within hours of the filing, CC'd to seemingly everyone in the neighborhood. Mr. Harrison has chosen to attack this community through frivolous litigation rather than simply comply with reasonable rules that all residents follow. The HOA will vigorously defend against these baseless claims and will pursue all available remedies, including counterclaims for the costs of this unnecessary legal action. But the tide in the community was turning. That evening, a group of 8 neighbors, including Tom Brennan and several people who'd shared their own HOA horror stories on Facebook, showed up at my workshop. We want to help, Tom said. Sharon here works as a paralegal. Michael knows a reporter at the Las Vegas Review-Journal who covers HOA issues. We're all sick of Patricia's bullying, and we think your case could change things for everyone. Sharon Valdez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, had brought a laptop. I've been looking into the HOA's finances, and there are some interesting discrepancies. Last year, they spent $42,000 on legal fees and enforcement. The year before, it was $38,000. That seems high for a community this size, doesn't it? What are you thinking? I asked. I'm thinking Patricia might be using HOA funds to pursue personal vendettas. If we can show a pattern of excessive enforcement spending, especially targeting residents who challenge her authority, that could be relevant to your case. Michael Torres, a stocky guy in his 30s who worked in IT, pulled out his phone. I've got screenshots of at least 15 separate incidents over the past 3 years where residents were fined for trivial violations. We're talking about things like kids' chalk drawings on driveways, holiday decorations being up 2 days too long, flowers planted in the wrong color family. The amounts add up to over $60,000 in fines. Some people paid. Others moved away rather than deal with it. I felt a spark of hope mixed with anger. Can we use this information? Tom nodded. It shows a pattern. Marcus needs to see all of this. If Patricia has been abusing her position, the court should know. We spent the next 2 hours going through documents, screenshots, and records. By the end of the night, we had a file an inch thick documenting the HOA's enforcement history. It painted a picture of an organization more interested in control and punishment than actual community management. I sent everything to Marcus, who called me the next morning sounding energized. Jack, this is gold. I'm going to file an amended complaint adding claims for abuse of authority and requesting an audit of HOA finances. And I think we should ask for a preliminary injunction preventing them from enforcing any fines or liens while the case is pending. Won't that make Patricia even angrier? Probably. But she's already doing everything she can to make your life difficult. We might as well go all in. The amended complaint was filed 2 days later, and the hearing on our motion for a preliminary injunction was scheduled for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, life got interesting. First, the Las Vegas Review-Journal ran a story about HOA abuse in Henderson suburbs, featuring my case prominently. The reporter, a woman named Jessica Chen, had done her homework. She interviewed me, Tom, Sharon, and several other residents. She also reached out to Patricia for comment. Patricia's quoted response was pure deflection. The Sunset Ridge HOA operates transparently and in accordance with all applicable laws. Mr. Harrison's allegations are a smokescreen for his unwillingness to follow rules that every other resident respects. But the article also included commentary from a local real estate attorney who reviewed the survey documents and stated plainly, if the workshop is outside the HOA boundaries as this survey indicates, the association has no authority over it. Continuing to impose fines would be legally questionable at best. The article ran on a Sunday. By Monday morning, I'd received calls from 3 other news outlets wanting to cover the story. The HOA situation in Nevada had been a hot-button issue for years, with multiple legislative attempts to reform HOA powers and increase oversight. My case was becoming a symbol of everything people hated about overzealous homeowner associations. Patricia, meanwhile, was doubling down. The daily fine emails continued, and the amount I supposedly owed was now over $3,000. She also began citing me for secondary violations. My truck was parked improperly in my driveway, my trash cans were visible from the street outside of collection hours, my front yard landscaping needed maintenance attention. Every email included a new fine or threat. "She's panicking," Marcus said when I forwarded him the latest batch of violation notices. "She knows the legal ground is shaky, so she's trying to overwhelm you with violations to justify her position. Keep every single email. This is all evidence of harassment." The preliminary injunction hearing arrived on a warm October morning. Clark County District Court was downtown, a modern building where family dramas, property disputes, and criminal cases all played out in sterile courtrooms with bad acoustics and uncomfortable seating. Marcus and I arrived early, sitting in the hallway outside Judge Linda Morrison's courtroom. Gerald Stevens showed up 10 minutes before the hearing, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing an expensive suit. Patricia was with him, dressed in a navy blazer and looking like she was preparing for battle. She glared at me as they walked past. I nodded politely, which seemed to irritate her more. Inside the courtroom, Judge Morrison was a gray-haired woman in her 60s with a no-nonsense demeanor. She'd clearly read the briefs because she started the hearing by cutting straight to the issue. "Mr. Chen, your client argues that his workshop is outside HOA jurisdiction based on a boundary survey. Mr. Stevens, your client disputes this and argues the entire property is subject to HOA covenants." "Is that accurate?" "Yes, Your Honor," both attorneys answered simultaneously. "Then let's start with the survey. Mr. Chen, walk me through what the survey shows." Marcus approached the podium with a blown-up copy of the survey map. He explained the history of the Sunset Ridge development, the Phase 3 boundary disputes, the utility easement issues, and how the final HOA plat excluded the back portion of my property. Judge Morrison studied the map carefully, occasionally asking questions. "And this survey was conducted by a licensed surveyor?" "Yes, Your Honor, Precision Land Surveying, which has been conducting surveys in Clark County for 23 years. Their findings are based on the original survey markers from 2008, which still exist and were verified during this survey. Mr. Stevens, what's your response? Gerald Stevens stood, looking less confident than when he'd arrived. Your Honor, the HOA's position is that the entire parcel at 7845 Desert Canyon Drive is part of Sunset Ridge. Mr. Harrison pays HOA dues, uses community amenities, and benefits from services funded by the association. He cannot selectively claim exemption from covenants while enjoying those benefits. But the survey shows a portion of his property is outside the legal boundaries defined in your plat map. Correct, Stevens hesitated. The survey raises questions about historical boundary determinations, but we believe the intent of the original development was to include the entire parcel. Intent doesn't matter if the legal description in the recorded plat map says otherwise, Judge Morrison said sharply. Do you have any survey evidence contradicting Mr. Harrison's survey? We haven't commissioned our own survey yet, Your Honor, but we intend to do so. So at this moment, the only survey evidence before the court supports Mr. Harrison's position. That's correct, but then I'm inclined to grant the preliminary injunction. The evidence currently suggests Mr. Harrison's workshop is outside your jurisdiction, which means the fines and lien are likely invalid. I'll issue a ruling by the end of the week, but Mr. Stevens, I'd suggest your client get their own survey done quickly if they want to contradict these findings. Patricia's face had gone red. She leaned forward and whispered urgently to Stevens, who put up a hand to quiet her. Your Honor, if I may, Stevens said. There's also the issue of Mr. Harrison's social media campaign against the HOA, which has created significant discord in the community. The HOA is concerned about reputational damage and, Mr. Stevens, Judge Morrison interrupted, your client is trying to enforce fines and a lien that may be legally baseless. If Mr. Harrison has responded by sharing facts about the situation with his neighbors, that's his right. I'm not going to punish someone for speaking truthfully about a legal dispute. Do you have anything else relevant to the injunction question? Stevens shook his head, looking defeated. Then we're done here. I'll have an order out by Friday. Mr. Chen, draft the proposed order and get it to Mr. Stevens for review by tomorrow. We walked out of the courtroom into the bright Nevada sunshine. Marcus was grinning. That went better than I expected. Judge Morrison clearly sees through their nonsense. What happens now? We wait for the order. Once it's signed, they can't enforce any fines or the lien while the case is pending. And Jack, I don't think they're going to get a survey that contradicts ours. Those boundary markers are decades old and well documented. Patricia's going to have to decide whether to drop this or take it to trial and risk losing badly. Judge Morrison's order came through on Thursday, exactly as Marcus predicted. The HOA was enjoined from enforcing any fines, liens, or other penalties related to my business pending final resolution of the case. The order was clear, thorough, and left no room for interpretation. I thought that would be the end of the escalation. I was wrong. 2 days after the order was issued, I came home from delivering a finished piece to a client in Summerlin and found Patricia and 2 HOA board members in my driveway taking photographs of my property. Not just the workshop, my entire house, yard, driveway, even my mailbox. What are you doing? I asked, walking toward them. Patricia lowered her camera. Documenting violations, Mr. Harrison. Since you seem determined to flout our authority, we're going to ensure every single covenant violation on your property is properly recorded and addressed. One of the board members, a thin man in his 50s named Barry Whitmore, pointed at my front yard. Your sprinkler heads are visible above ground level. Section 8.3 of the landscaping requirements specifies flush-mounted irrigation equipment. The other board member, a woman named Dorothy Keene, who'd never said a word during any HOA meeting I'd attended, chimed in. Your house numbers are the wrong font. Section 12.1 requires Arial font for address markers. Yours appear to be Helvetica. I stared at them, genuinely unsure if they were serious. You're kidding. We don't kid about covenant compliance, Patricia said coldly. You wanted to fight us, Mr. Harrison. Now you'll discover that we're very thorough when we need to be. They spent another 20 minutes photographing every inch of my property, pointing out increasingly absurd violations. A small crack in my driveway concrete, a garden hose that was visible from the street, a decorative plant in my front yard that they claimed was 1 inch too tall according to height restrictions for non-native desert vegetation. After they left, I sat in my workshop feeling a mix of anger and exhaustion. This was harassment, pure and simple. They couldn't touch my business, so they were going to make my life miserable in every other way possible. Marcus's response when I called him was immediate and decisive. They're building a harassment case for us. Document everything. Take your own photos showing how minor these alleged violations are. And Jack, I'm going to file a motion for sanctions against the HOA for violating the spirit of the court's order. This is retaliatory, and Judge Morrison won't like it. Over the next week, I received 17 separate violation notices for issues ranging from my trash can being visible 20 minutes past the designated time to a small weed growing in a crack in my sidewalk. Each notice came with a fine, which the HOA knew they couldn't enforce but were documenting anyway. The community Facebook page exploded again. Other residents started posting their own violation notices, many of them equally absurd. Someone had been cited for their doormat being the wrong color. Another person was fined because their car's tire valve stem caps were green instead of black, making them too conspicuous. Sharon Valdez organized a meeting at Tom Brennan's house. 23 residents showed up, all of them with stories of HOA overreach. The energy in the room was angry but also hopeful. People were tired of being bullied, and my case had given them a focal point for resistance. We need to recall the board, Sharon said. The HOA bylaws allow for a special election if 20% of homeowners sign a petition. We've got 312 homes in Sunset Ridge, which means we need 63 signatures. I can get 63 signatures by the end of the week, Michael Torres said. After that newspaper article, everyone's talking about this. People are ready for change. Tom raised a practical concern. What about the people who support Patricia? She's been president for 7 years. She must have some base of support. She does, Sharon admitted. Mostly older residents who like the strict enforcement because they think it maintains property values. But I've been talking to people, and even some of her supporters are uncomfortable with how she's handled Jack's situation. The harassment has been too obvious. The recall petition was circulated the next day. By the end of the week, it had 97 signatures, well over the required threshold. Sharon filed it with the HOA board on a Monday morning, hand-delivering it to Patricia's house, with 3 witnesses present to document the delivery. Patricia's response came in the form of a letter from Gerald Stevens claiming the petition was procedurally defective due to alleged irregularities in signature collection. The letter didn't specify what those irregularities were, just vague accusations of improper solicitation and signatures obtained under false pretenses. Sharon, who'd been meticulous about following the bylaws, immediately called the Nevada Real Estate Division, which had oversight of HOA governance issues. A representative confirmed that the petition met all requirements and told Sharon to respond to Stevens in writing, noting that the HOA was legally required to schedule a special election within 60 days. Meanwhile, my court case was proceeding toward trial. Discovery had begun, which meant both sides were exchanging documents and information. Marcus requested all HOA financial records, board meeting minutes, and enforcement history for the past 5 years. The HOA requested all my business records, tax returns, and client communications. They're on a fishing expedition, Marcus said. They want to find something, anything, to make you look bad, but your records are clean, right, completely. I report all my income, pay my taxes, keep detailed client files. I run a legitimate business. Then let them fish. Meanwhile, their financial records are going to be very interesting. When the HOA's financial documents arrived, Sharon, who'd volunteered to help review them, found exactly what she'd suspected. Over the past 5 years, the HOA had spent nearly $200,000 on legal fees and enforcement actions. For a community of 312 homes paying modest annual dues, that was an enormous percentage of the budget. More troubling, the detailed billing records from Gerald Stevens's firm showed that a huge portion of those fees were for enforcement actions against individual homeowners. Patricia had authorized legal action over issues like unauthorized patio furniture colors, improper hedge trimming, and even one case where she'd hired an attorney to fight a resident who'd installed a doorbell camera without pre-approval. "She's been using HOA money like a personal legal slush fund," Sharon said, spreading the documents across my workshop table. "And look at this, she's sued or threatened to sue 23 different homeowners over the past 5 years. 23. Most of them ended up settling or giving in rather than fight." Marcus incorporated this information into our case filings, arguing that the pattern demonstrated abuse of authority and supported our request for attorney fees. He also filed the motion for sanctions, pointing out that the HOA's retaliatory violation campaign after the preliminary injunction order violated the court's implicit directive to maintain the status quo pending trial. Judge Morrison scheduled a hearing on the sanctions motion for early November. By this point, the case had taken on a life of its own. The Las Vegas Review-Journal had run 2 follow-up articles. Local TV news had covered the recall petition. I'd been interviewed on a radio show about HOA reform. My little furniture restoration business dispute had become a cause célèbre for everyone frustrated with HOA overreach in Nevada. The sanctions hearing was contentious. Marcus presented the 17 violation notices I'd received in the 2 weeks after the preliminary injunction, along with comparison data showing I'd received 0 violation notices in the 6 months before the business dispute started. "This is textbook retaliation, Your Honor," Marcus argued. "The HOA can't touch my client's business, so they're manufacturing violations to punish him for exercising his legal rights." Gerald Stevens tried to argue that the violations were legitimate and unrelated to the business dispute, but Judge Morrison wasn't buying it. "Mr. Stevens, your client cited Mr. Harrison for his house numbers being the wrong font. Are you really going to tell me that's a good faith enforcement of community standards? The covenants specify Arial font, Your Honor. And how many other homes in Sunset Ridge have been cited for font violations?" Stevens shuffled papers, not answering. "That's what I thought," Judge Morrison said. "Here's my ruling. The HOA is sanctioned $5,000 payable to Mr. Harrison for retaliatory enforcement in violation of the court's preliminary injunction order. Furthermore, the HOA is enjoined from issuing any new violation notices to Mr. Harrison except for legitimate health and safety issues, until this case is resolved. If they violate this order, the sanctions will double. Am I clear?" "Yes, Your Honor," Stevens said quietly. Patricia looked like she wanted to explode but was holding herself in check through sheer force of will. As we left the courtroom, she practically hissed at me. "You're destroying this community." "No," I said calmly. "I'm just running a business on property you have no authority over. You're the one who chose to make it a war." The $5,000 sanction was significant, but even more significant was what happened the next day. 3 HOA board members resigned. Barry Whitmore, Dorothy Keene, and the treasurer, a man named Paul Crenshaw who'd been mostly silent throughout the dispute. All 3 submitted letters citing disagreement with the board's direction and handling of legal matters. With 3 board seats vacant and the recall election looming, Patricia's power base was crumbling. Sharon and the other reform-minded residents immediately began organizing candidates to run in the special election. Tom Brennan agreed to run for president. Sharon filed for a board seat. Michael Torres did the same. Several other respected, level-headed community members rounded out the slate. The election was scheduled for early December, exactly 60 days after the petition was filed. The campaign was unlike anything Sunset Ridge had seen before. Yard signs appeared supporting various candidates. Residents organized forums to discuss HOA governance. The Las Vegas Review-Journal sent a reporter to cover the election as a follow-up to their HOA reform coverage. Patricia ran for re-election, of course, along with two allies. A woman named Margaret Simmons, who'd lived in Sunset Ridge since the beginning and shared Patricia's strict enforcement philosophy, and a retired accountant named Hugh Bradford, who'd always supported Patricia's approach. The campaign got ugly. Patricia sent a mass email to all residents claiming that Tom, Sharon, and their allies wanted to eliminate all covenant enforcement and turn Sunset Ridge into a lawless community where anything goes. She cited my business as an example of what would happen if her opponents won: commercial activity, traffic, noise, and declining property values. Tom responded with his own email, measured and factual. He pointed out that I'd proven my business was outside HOA jurisdiction, that Patricia had spent hundreds of thousands in HOA funds on legal battles and enforcement actions, and that community harmony had deteriorated under her leadership. He proposed a platform of reasonable enforcement, transparent finances, and treating residents with respect rather than suspicion. Meanwhile, my court case was heading toward a trial date in January. The HOA had finally commissioned their own survey, but it came back confirming exactly what my survey had shown. The workshop was outside HOA boundaries. Gerald Stevens tried to argue that there were ambiguities in how the boundaries should be interpreted, but it was a weak position and everyone knew it. In late November, Marcus got a call from Stevens proposing a settlement. The HOA would withdraw all fines and the lien, acknowledge that my workshop was outside their jurisdiction, and pay $30,000 toward my attorney fees. In exchange, I would dismiss the case and agree not to pursue further claims. "What do you think?" I asked Marcus. "It's a reasonable offer. You've already won the preliminary injunction, you've been awarded sanctions, and realistically, if we go to trial, you'll probably get a judgment saying exactly what they're offering in the settlement, that your workshop is outside their jurisdiction. The attorney fees award might be higher if we win at trial, but it might also be lower. Trials are always a gamble. But if we settle, Patricia can claim she didn't really lose." Marcus shook his head. "Jack, Patricia has already lost. She's lost in the court of public opinion. She's probably going to lose the election, and she's been sanctioned by a judge. Taking the settlement doesn't change any of that. It just ends the case cleanly and gets you paid faster." I thought about it for 2 days. Finally, I agreed to the settlement with one addition. The HOA had to send a letter to all residents explaining that my workshop was outside their jurisdiction, and the enforcement action had been withdrawn due to boundary determination issues. I wanted it on the record, clearly stated, so there could be no confusion or misrepresentation. Stevens agreed. The settlement was finalized the first week of December, 3 days before the special election. Election day arrived on a Saturday. The vote was conducted at the community clubhouse, with paper ballots and a procedure that Sharon had insisted be scrupulously transparent. Multiple volunteer ballot counters, representatives from different candidate slates observing, and a clear chain of custody for the ballot box. Turnout was extraordinary. 208 homeowners voted, representing 67% of the community. I voted early, then spent the day in my workshop trying to focus on a complicated veneer repair, but mostly just checking my phone for updates. The results were announced at 7 p.m. Tom Brennan won the presidency with 62% of the vote. Sharon Valdez won her board seat with 58%. Michael Torres won his seat with 55%. 2 other reform candidates also won. Patricia Moreland received 38% in the presidential race, a decisive defeat. Margaret Simmons and Hugh Bradford also lost their races. The celebration at Tom's house that night was jubilant. Neighbors who'd never been particularly close were hugging, sharing food and drinks, talking about the future of Sunset Ridge with actual optimism. "This isn't just about you," Tom told me, beer in hand and smile on his face. "But you were the catalyst. You stood up when it mattered and you gave everyone else the courage to do the same." Sharon raised her glass. "To Jack, for refusing to back down, and to everyone here who's going to help us build a better community." The new HOA board took office in January. Their first official action was to pass a resolution committing to proportionate enforcement, transparent finances, and treating residents as valued community members rather than subjects to be controlled. They hired a new management company with a reputation for balanced, professional HOA administration. And they commissioned a full audit of the previous 5 years of HOA finances, with Sharon overseeing the process. That audit, completed in February, found some troubling irregularities. Nothing criminal, but it showed that Patricia had used her position to prioritize legal actions against residents she personally disliked, had approved spending without proper board review in several cases, and had maintained unusually close ties with Gerald Stevens, who'd billed the HOA at rates higher than typical for similar work. The new board voted to terminate the HOA's relationship with Stevens's firm and to implement new financial controls requiring board approval for any legal expenditure over $5,000. As for me, I kept doing what I'd been doing all along, restoring furniture in my workshop behind my house, completely outside HOA jurisdiction. Business was actually better than before. The publicity from the case had brought new clients, and Angela Cortez was sending me more projects than I could handle. I hired an assistant, a young guy named Ryan who was learning the trade, and we worked side by side refinishing antiques and custom pieces. Patricia moved away in March. The rumor was that she'd accepted a job opportunity in Utah, but Sharon thought it was more likely she just couldn't stand living in a community where she'd been so thoroughly repudiated. Her house sold quickly. Henderson real estate was hot, and she was gone without fanfare or goodbyes. One warm evening in April, I was in the workshop putting the final touches on a beautiful walnut secretary desk from the 1890s when Tom stopped by with a 6-pack of beer. "Thought you might want to take a break," he said, handing me a bottle. We sat on the workshop's small porch, looking out over the desert landscape as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "You know what the funny thing is?" Tom said. Patricia was so obsessed with rules and control that she never stopped to check whether she actually had the authority to do what she was doing. If she'd just looked at the original plat map before threatening you, none of this would have happened. Or if she just talked to me like a human being instead of showing up with violation notices and threats, I added. That too, but I guess some people lead with power instead of reason. Tom took a sip of his beer. "Anyway, I wanted to thank you again. The community feels different now. People are friendlier, more relaxed. It's like we've all been released from something." "You did most of the work," I pointed out. "The recall, the election, the new policies. But you started it by refusing to roll over. That matters." We finished our beers as darkness settled over Sunset Ridge, my workshop sitting peacefully in its space that had always been outside HOA jurisdiction. A small piece of land that had accidentally become the battleground for something much larger than furniture restoration. The secretary desk sold 2 weeks later for $18,000 to a collector in San Francisco. I packed it carefully, loaded it into my truck, and delivered it personally, enjoying the drive through the desert and into California. When I got back to Henderson, there were 3 new project inquiries in my email and a message from Angela about a estate sale in Las Vegas where several pieces needed restoration. I walked out to my workshop, my perfectly legal, completely authorized entirely outside of HOA jurisdiction workshop, and got back to work, the smell of wood and finish in the air, my hands busy with the craft I loved, in a community that had learned the hard way that power without legitimate authority is just bullying, and bullies can be beaten when people stand together and demand better. The whole experience had cost me stress, money, and countless hours of frustration. But in the end, I'd kept my business, helped reform an abusive HOA, and made real friends among neighbors who'd stood with me when it mattered. And I'd learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to back down when you know you're right, even when the fight seems daunting and the opposition seems overwhelming. My property line, according to that professional survey that had cost me $2,000 but saved everything, ran exactly 14 feet and 7 inches in front of my workshop's entrance. Everything beyond that line was mine, unequivocally and legally, free from HOA covenants and Patricia Moreland's clipboard tyranny. And on that property, in that workshop, I built a business and a life that was entirely, completely, satisfyingly my own.